G'day, athletes. My name's Keith, and you're listening to the Kilted Athlete podcast. Imagine you're on the last final stages of your first marathon. You can see the finish line. There's only a couple of 100 meters in sight. You've been training for this thing for months. You've been up early every weekend to do a long run. You've been disciplined. You've been focused on achieving this goal. And there it is, the finish line's in sight. You cross that finish line, you're elated, the overwhelming sense of achievement is undescribable. Later on that day, as you're unwinding, you're starting to relax more. You're kind of wondering, what next? You wake up the next morning, and there's no long training runs to do. Um, your routine's out of sync. You've achieved this goal, but what now? You start to feel a bit down. You kind of feel a bit empty because that goal that you've been working on for the last few months is no longer there. You've achieved it, but what now? What you're feeling is not uncommon. In fact, whether you're an amateur athlete or whether you're at Olympic level, most athletes at some stage have felt the same thing. Sometimes it's called post-marathon blues. It can also be called the post-achievement slump. But it's a normal feeling, that feeling that you've put so much of your time and energy into something, and now that one thing is over. What do you do now? So in this episode, I'll be talking about the what now, what to do after you've achieved that goal. But before we get started, I'm going to do the whole spiel about if you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, please do so. Please subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up, do all that cool stuff because it kind of makes me feel good when I see I've got another follower, and more people are giving thumbs up and commenting and stuff. It's good for me. It helps me get motivated to do more podcast episodes. So it's win-win. It makes me feel good and makes me do more podcast episodes. Win-win. All right, back into it. So just because it's called post-marathon blues, or commonly called post-marathon blues, doesn't mean it's exclusive to marathon runners. It can be any sporting event. You set your goal up, any athletic event, or even any non-athletic event. If you've never felt it before, it's kind of akin to that last day of a holiday, when you've been planning a holiday for 12 months, you've been saving up your money, you've been so excited about this holiday, and then that last day when you know the holiday's all over, and you have this feeling of, you're kind of empty and down a bit. Obviously because your holiday's over and you've got to get back to your normal routine, going to work and everything, but it's not just that. It's also that you've been focused on this thing for so long, you've been saving up money for it, you've been planning for it, and it's over. So it's kind of quite similar to that. And throughout this episode, I'm going to use that analogy a bit. Obviously because I enjoy holidays, so, but there's a similarity between the two. So the post-marathon blues, I have felt it quite a bit over the years, not just with running marathons, but with other athletic achievements, other goals I've set. Once that goal sets, once I've finished, once I've achieved that goal, it's over. What now? And it's kind of easy to slump into go exactly the opposite of what the person you were before you were training for this thing. So it's quite easy, just if left unchecked, to go back to like doing almost nothing from from um, from being this highly disciplined person that got out of bed early every morning to do your run or do your training, went for a long run every weekend, um, to this person that just thinks, oh well, there's no point getting out of bed early now. I've got nothing to train for, no goals, so I might as well sleep in. And it's same if going back to the holiday analogy, um, you might have been saving up for the last 12 months, putting a certain amount of money aside out of your pay. Each time got paid towards this holiday, and now the holiday's done, so you kind of feel, well, I don't really need to save that money anymore. So your savings plan just kind of goes out the window. Kind of similarly, your training plan goes out the window because you think, well, there's nothing left to train for. Um, there's nothing to get out of bed early for. So it's kind of can have this like downfall effect. And look, as a like a weekend amateur runner, um, feeling that myself, I can only imagine what an Olympic athlete who's probably been training for 4 years or more for this one thing would be feeling once this one thing's over. That's taken up a big chunk of their life, 4 years of their life to train for this one thing, and suddenly it's done and dusted. It's kind of like, what now? And also if you're doing a sport that's you're regularly playing every weekend throughout the season, and the season comes to an end, you can also get that feeling at the end of the season. What now? So how do we deal with this? And look, um, I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a psychology degree or anything. These are just my tips as a person who has experienced this a lot, as an athlete who has set goals, achieved goals, and felt that feeling of emptiness after achieving this goal. So these are kind of like my tips, not the tips of a professional psychologist or sports psychologist or whatever. These are just Keith the Kilt Man's tips from his experience. So number one, you want to recover. So yeah, if you've run that and I know I'm using the term marathon a lot, but this could be, it could be anything. It could be a strongman event. It could be a powerlifting meet. It could be a boxing tournament. Whatever goal you've chosen, it's 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 relevant. Don't just think because I'm saying using the word marathon a lot, it's not relevant to your sport. It's relevant. It could be the end of the footy season. Um, it, it could whatever you're doing, whatever sport you're doing. So recover. You need to recover from this. Obviously, if you've run, 42 kilometres, the next day you're going to be sore. You might have a few injuries. Need to recover. End of the footy season, you're obviously probably going to have some injuries there that you need to recover from. If you've been in a boxing tournament, obviously you're going to have a few injuries there that you need to recover from. So recover, rest, get some good nutrition into you. Um, celebrate your victory, but don't go overboard. Don't um, celebrate too hard with alcohol and stuff. Obviously, you know, continue with your healthy eating lifestyle. Um, but celebrate. Have a couple of drinks if you want to, but don't overdo it. It is also important that you give your body a chance to recover from the intense training um, that you're that you've been putting yourself through. If you're at the end of a footy season, obviously when you start the footy season, you're fresh. By the end, 6 months later, by the end of that footy season, you're you're pretty busted. Um, you might have a few niggling injuries, um, best case scenario, but you could have a few serious injuries there also. So make sure you're recovering. If you need to see physio or another professional about your recovery, do so. With with a marathon or with any big running event, I always advise going for a walk the next day. So getting up the next morning, going for a walk, get those legs ironed out, um, not kind of like sitting down all day, but get those legs moving. Um, so you're still active, but you're not like kind of pushing yourself, you're allowing yourself to recover, but still like keeping your legs moving. So yeah, even though I'm saying recover, you want to be, a little bit active in the day after, and also it helps kind of like refresh the mind. If you're going out for a walk, especially if you've travelled somewhere, for this event that you're doing, if you've travelled somewhere for a marathon, um, it's good to get out for a walk and have a look around. You're in a new spot, so it's good for you not only physically but also mentally. You're kind of looking around, um, seeing what's new, and you kind of like giving your head a bit of a chance to regroup. So the next thing you want to do is connect with positive people. Um, so those positive friends that kind of encourage you to achieve your goals, and like-minded people. They might not be participating in the same sport that you are. They might be doing a different sport, but but they still kind of understand what you're going through. So yeah, it's important to connect with these people, connecting with these positive friends, positive, you know, um, people in your life. I did a podcast episode a few months ago about the importance of having positive people in your life. So this is a point where you need to connect with these people. You need to connect with the positive influences. I find that talking to positive people after an event is look, it's kind of a game changer in maintaining a positive mindset. The next thing you want to do is maintain the good habits that you've been doing for the last few months or however long it's taken you to train for this goal. So maintain those habits of getting up early on the Sunday morning. Um, maintain all the positive things. It's it takes a long time to develop a habit, but it takes a short time to break the habit. So if you're used to getting up early in the morning to go for that long run on a Sunday morning, the more weeks that you have off from doing that, the harder it will be to get back into the habit. So even if those first few weeks, you're getting up early on the Sunday morning to go for a walk or a slow social run with a couple of friends or something like that, even if you're not in that training mindset of training for your next marathon or your next boxing tournament or your next powerlifting meet or whatever, um, maintaining that habit of getting up early, going for that, you know, slow social run or walk or getting back into the gym, um, because if you break that habit, it becomes harder and harder to get back into it the longer you leave that habit for. And I'll go back to holiday analogy again. If you've been saving money out of your pay every time you get paid to go towards this holiday, and then the holiday's over, so you stop saving that money. So instead of saving that, putting that money aside, you just go and spend it. Then it kind of becomes harder to allocate that money and put it aside when you next want to start saving again. So yeah, maintain those positive habits. So the next thing is to continue training. Now, this kind of goes a bit hand in hand with the last one of maintaining the habits. But yeah, continue the training, even if you haven't actually got a goal set itself, and it doesn't need to be as high intensity as you were training for your goal. And obviously, you need to take into account any injuries. If you're going to see a physio or a doctor after your event, and they've given you a plan, obviously take that into account. But continue training. Um, so with most sports, they have a season, and I'll do an episode about training periodization at some stage. But generally, sports will have a season. So let's take football, for example. They have season might start like March, end in October. They have a 6 month playing season, and then they have what's called like a maintenance phase, which for 3 months after they're kind of training at a lower level to recover from injuries, but still like keep that that training happening, so they're not slumping back into that you know um, the habit of or the non-habit that of not training at all. They're still doing some training. They're still, getting up early in the morning. They're not training to that intensity, but you know, they're factoring in any injuries, any recovery, but they're still making sure they're getting some sort of training in. And then 3 months out from the first game, they'll start ramping that up. So that's what's called the training phase. So you kind of have your training phase for 3 months before, then you've got 6 months of playing phase, then you've got 3 months of maintenance phase. I will, as I said, I will do a podcast episode about that at some stage because it is quite interesting and it's relevant to most sports really. Even like your running season is usually most of your runs are held over winter between about March and October, and then after that you go kind of into a maintenance phase where you're still keeping it running up but not training as intense, and then 3 months out from your first run you usually ramp up the intensity. So yeah, as I said, I'll do an episode later on about that because it's quite interesting and quite relevant. Um, so so anyway, yeah, just keep training, keep the habits, um, keep training. Go back to the gym. You've done your powerlifting meet. You've lifted a lot of weight. You might have got been a little bit injured or a bit sore. Kind of get back into emotions and start lifting weights, even if they're not as heavy as you have been lifting. Give your body a chance to recover. As I said, go on any advice from any physios or healthcare professionals that you might have seen afterwards. And look, that's another thing, a point I need to add too. If you do have an injury after your event, make sure you go and see the appropriate healthcare professional and get guidance from them about when you should when you should resume your training again, what kind of training, at what level you should do your training. But obviously, like if I don't have another marathon on the books, I'm probably not going to be out running, 30 Ks every Sunday, but I'll be doing something to maintain the habits and to keep my body used to actually like getting out there and doing things. Now, the last one I want to talk about is setting your next goal. Now, look, I'm probably a bit different than a lot some people. Some people might set the next goal after they've achieved the first goal. Um, I'm kind of a bit different because I tend to set my next goal before the first goal has been achieved or before the last goal has been achieved. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, because I've got something else to move on to. Um, so, sometimes the goal is like completely different from what I've just achieved. So, an example of that is a few years ago, I had this goal. So, the running season, my last run for the year, I think finished at the end of September. And then in November, there was a strongman competition, um, one of those old school kind of Highland strongman comps where you're lifting up rocks and putting them on your shoulder and things like that. So that was kind of like a completely different goal to what I'd been doing all year. So it doesn't have to be the, the same goal, um, but I kind of I said that I found that event probably mid-year while I was still in my running season, so I actually had that goal set. So I had something to move on to. So once I'd finished my last run for the year, I kind of switched into strength mode. It's like, right, I don't need to run quite so much, but I now need to focus on getting stronger to achieve this goal of doing my first ever strongman event. So I find that setting the goal before you've actually achieved your last goal um, kind of helps. Doesn't mean you have to finish that goal and not have any rest and get straight back into it, but you've kind of got something to focus on. Um, I'm I'm very I'm very goal orientated, so I kind of often have a few goals on the run at any given time. And going back to the holiday analogy, um, so and this kind of drives my wife nuts a bit, but I will always have like another holiday planned. Um, so if I have this year's holiday I've saved up for and everything, I'm already got in mind what we want, what we're going to do for the next holiday. So what next year's holiday is going to look like. And I already kind of start planning that. And my wife says, my wife's a very tolerant person, by the way. Big shout out to my wife Jo. Um, she kind of says, we haven't even been on the last holiday yet, and you're already planning this next one. And it kind of like I find that helps, especially on that last day of the holiday, as I said, we've got kind of that blues because you've got to go back to work, back to reality. And it's like, hang on, but I've got this next holiday. And that's going to help me also with the savings because I'm not going to take that money I've been saving and not save it anymore because I've got that next holiday I've got to save up for. So going back to the sports thing, you know, um, even if I have no more marathons to run for the year, but I set this other goal, for example, a strongman event. Um, Instead of going for that long run in the morning, on the Sunday morning, getting up early, going for that long run, I might be using that time to go and do a big weight session at the gym. So yeah, set that next goal. And look, I think I've kind of like Googled this to see what other people are doing, and I haven't seen any other advice saying that to say set your next goal before you achieve the last goal. But um, that's what I do, and I find that's what helps. Um, but definitely, like as soon as you set that next goal, imagine like think how focused you were when you were when you're planning, when you're training for that first goal. You kind of want to be back there because it was you had something to to work towards. And I find being in a constant state of having something to work towards helps with motivation, helps with discipline. Um, and the discipline is like anyone can be motivated, but it's a discipline that's what's going to get you there. So people, you often hear people saying, "Oh, I'm highly motivated," but that's only part of it. The discipline is what's going to get you there. The discipline of waking up in the morning knowing it's going to be like, super humid and hot, but still going and doing that long run. The discipline of getting up early in the morning when it's raining, you just want to stay in bed. Um, the discipline is what's going to get you there. The motivation is what happens the night before, going, oh yeah, I can go and do that. It's a discipline is what's going to force you out of bed, stop you from hitting that snooze button, making you do this thing. So um, maintaining a discipline is what's going to get you there, and having having a goal, always having something to work towards is what's going to help maintain the discipline. Once you break the discipline, you break the habits. As I said, it's quite hard to get back into the habit, especially if you've been out of that habit for quite some time. So yeah. So so they're my tips for dealing with the post marathon blues, post achievement slump, whatever you like to call it. They're my tips. As I said, not tips from a professional psychologist, but tips from somebody that's been there, dealt with this situation a lot. Um, yeah, so going through them again. Firstly, recover. You need to recover from any injuries, the months of hard work that you've been doing. You need to give your body a chance to recover. Um, get out there, be active again, even if it's going for a walk or whatever. Connect with positive people. All right, find those positive influences on your life, those friends, those positive people in your life. Connect with them. Um, maintain the habits. Maintain your healthy habits. Um, get back into training as soon as you can. Obviously, going on the advice of any physios or healthcare professionals that you might be seeing, and set your next goal. If not before, like I do, um, pretty soon afterwards, get back on the horse. Um, yeah, so that's it, guys. So once again, thank you for listening to the podcast. Um, Feel free to comment on the episode. Feel free to contact me if you've got any questions, if you've got any suggestions for other podcast episodes. Please contact me. You can comment on the in the comment section down below the episode. You can email me at kiltmanfitness@gmail.com, and you can even find me on Facebook and Instagram at the Kilted Athlete Podcast. Thanks, guys. Talk to you next time.